There is this misconception that your energy expenditure goes down from the age 20 to 60, and this study clearly showed that it's not true.
And then when I took up weight training and went completely sugar-free, that's when I was able to return back to the weight of high school.
Don't be overly concerned about your metabolic rate. Be concerned more about your overall health and the values. What do you value?
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Marissa Lennox.
Welcome to the Zoomer. I'm Marissa Lennox. Before we get started, a big welcome to our remote studio audience. It is so great to see your faces again. And before long, you'll be back in studio with us. And I, for one, cannot wait for that date. Now, you've seen the headlines. 10 easy ways to boost your metabolism or cheat your way to a faster metabolism. We talk about metabolism like it's something we can manipulate by taking a pill or drinking green tea. The reality isn't quite so simple. On today's show, we dispel some of the common misconceptions about metabolism, and we'll discuss the results of a new international study, which counters the common belief that metabolism decreases dramatically after the age of 20, making it harder to lose weight and keep in shape. But before we dive in, let's tee up the topic.
Almost 3 in 5 Canadians have seen unwanted weight changes in the last year. Of that, 42% have gained weight, and 37% report an increase of as much as 6 to 10 pounds. But before you go ahead and blame those extra pounds on sluggish middle-aged metabolism, think again. While it's true your metabolism is linked to weight, it's rarely the cause of excess weight gain. According to a new study, our metabolism stays relatively the same throughout life, so those extra pounds are likely due to changes in lifestyle. As for those Canadians with unwanted weight gains, 3/4 saw a change in their eating habits, with 51% finding comfort in food during the pandemic, while over 20% of previously active Canadians became inactive.
Dr. Ravussin, I do want to start with you because you are one of the co-authors of a new study which was published in the journal Science, which, as far as I'm concerned, counters what we initially thought we knew about our metabolism, which is that it decreases linearly with age. What this says is that it remains relatively stable between the ages of 20 to 60, at which point it starts to decline. Tell us about the new data about this study and what it means for us.
Yeah, the new data is really that this is using, first of all, a very, very large sample size. And we measured energy expenditure by a mean, which is quite good to assess energy expenditure in free living conditions. Now, the interest of this study was the number of participants, 6,400 and some, from age 8 days to 95 years of age. And from about 29 countries, 64% of the participants in the study were females and the rest males. And I think that, like you defined it, there is this misconception that your energy expenditure goes down from the age 20 to 60. And this study clearly showed that it's not true. It's quite stable. But what is important, there is a huge variability between people at any given weight or age in terms of energy expenditure.
Dr. Wharton, were you surprised by the results of this study, and do you find them significant at all?
So from a clinical standpoint, this study didn't really make a big difference in terms of how we treat patients. But it was really important for us to know that between ages 20 to 60, there's not much of a change. So the metabolic rate does not account for some of the weight changes that we see, and people ask us, 35-year-old woman will say, my weight has gone up because my metabolic rate went down. That's not the case. It never was the case. And we actually do metabolic rate testing at our clinic, specifically to let people know that it wasn't your metabolic rate and the changes in it that caused the weight to go up. There were other factors.
But we all know that person who used to be able to engorge in their 20s and then in 30s pack on a couple more pounds. What is the reason for it then, if not for the metabolism slowing down?
So that's somewhat of a complicated question because we don't actually understand the natural physiology of weight changes. The natural progression throughout our entire life has not really been studied in a proper way. But what we do know is that the majority of people, as they go up in age, they actually have more caloric intake. And that more caloric intake is due to lots of different things. But the higher caloric intake means that the weight is going to go on, and it's not necessarily the metabolic rate that's driving the higher weight.
Dr. Ravussin, what happens? I mean, this was really interesting to me because it stays stable between the ages of 20 and 60, as you noted, and then at 60, something happens. It declines dramatically. So what is it about the age of 60 that changes the metabolic rate in our bodies?
What really decreased from the age of 50 or 60 is really your physical activity. I can tell you, I've been a runner all my life. I don't run anymore because of my knees, but I go on a treadmill or elliptical system, and my physical activity is lower. Like the doctor said, there is an increase in energy intake or caloric intake. And I think that there is a change in body composition. You know, you have less of what we call fat-free mass, which is mostly your muscle mass, and more fat. And the fat is burning less calories. And this is why you have this decrease from the age of 50 or 60 and ongoing.
But presumably people at the ages of 30 and 40 see a decline in muscle mass too, but their metabolic rate stays the same.
There is a decline with age from the age of 20, but this decline is about 2 calories per year. It means 20 calories of energy expenditure per decade. Now, if you take 5 decades, it's 100 calories. Now, 100 calories is not a lot, and it's decreasing despite the fact that there is a decrease in fat-free mass or muscle mass.
Now, Dr. Wharton, you don't find this terribly groundbreaking, I understand.
Not for somebody who's doing clinical medicine every single day. So we actually understood what is driving that elevated weight. And it's not that we're going to change the person's metabolic rate. Again, a 35-year-old woman or man comes in and says, my weight is up. I believe it is my metabolic rate. I'm going to absolutely tell them it is not your metabolic rate that's driving this elevated weight. There's genetics, there's complicated aspects, there's psychological factors, there's caloric intake, there's physical activity, there's multiple things, but it's not primarily your metabolic rate. And we need to be clear about that so people can move past it to real treatments that actually work.
All right, on the other side of this break, we'll discuss some of those factors. When we come back, do men really have faster metabolisms than women? We'll tell you about it on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
And then when I took up weight training and went completely sugar-free, that's when I was able to return back to the weight of high school.
Welcome back. Conventional wisdom has it that women have slower metabolisms than men, and menopause only makes things worse, slowing women's metabolisms even more. But is it true? A new study published in the journal Science found that after controlling for size and muscle differences, there was no difference between the metabolic rates of men and women. Now, I found this absolutely fascinating. Dr. Ravussin, I go back to you as one of the co-authors of this study. Were you surprised by that?
Yes and no. Yes, because like I said, all the results from resting metabolic rate or sedentary metabolic rate show a difference between males and females when it comes to your metabolism. Now you have to realize that we express the metabolic rate per unit of what we call fat-free mass or muscle mass, but fat is also costing some energy. Much less. But for example, if you have 10 kilograms of fat on your body versus 5 kilograms, if you have to move with that, you are carrying an extra backpack of 5 kilograms, on your back, and this costs energy. And now the sex difference, I think there is something when it comes to resting metabolic rate, and there is also something which is happening throughout the menopause. There's no question about that.
All right, Julie, I want to bring you in here because I see you nodding your head there. Obviously, you have a lot to say. I'm curious your reaction to this. As a nutritionist, will this impact you in terms of how you treat your clients?
I'm very empowered by this study because what I want to bring people's attention to is sarcopenia after the age of 50. The fact that women do have muscle wasting. If we can really encourage women to weight train and really watch the amount of sugars and starches that they consume, then we can really fix a lot of the issues we see post-menopause. So instead of focusing on, oh, it's something I can't do anything about, it's very disempowering to think it's your metabolism. But when you see, if I can address my insulin resistance, if I can manage my sugars and starches, because both of those drive insulin too high, and we have to remember insulin is a hormone that actually makes us hold on to our weight, and it prevents the expression of another hormone called glucagon, and glucagon is the hormone of fat burning. They actually cannot express at the same time. So if you can keep your sugars and starches down and start to put on more muscle as you get older, that's where we see incredible empowerment. Like, notice that I actually was gaining weight around the age of 45 as I was starting to head into, I was fully perimenopausal right before menopause. And then when I took up weight training and went completely sugar-free, that's when I was able to return back to the weight of high school. And that's what I really want people to get, is that you can truly be in the driver's seat of your journey.
You know, Julie mentioned it, but in layman's terms, explain to us that relationship between muscle mass and metabolism.
When it comes to muscle mass and metabolism, your muscle does way more than fat. So what we can do to combat this muscle loss is to continually weight train. I mean, I started experimenting with kettlebells in the last year, and I was somebody who was very cardio heavy, lots of dancing, and then depriving myself of certain things. Because, you know, in my 20s, I was able to drink all night, eat something bad, and then roll into work bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And that's what I've noticed is the shift into my 30s, is you can't do that anymore. I really got into weight training, just cutting out eating after a certain time of night so that I could feel ready to go to work out the next day. And I noticed after I stopped training so vigorously in weight training and kettlebell, I was able to feel the carry-through effect of still burning a ton of calories even though I'd stopped doing that kind of activity.
Dr. Wharton, I would be remiss to not ask you about shows like The Biggest Loser, that promote rapid weight loss. What impact does that have on our metabolisms and on our bodies generally?
So the show, The Biggest Loser, is a Biggest Loser type of show. But it was fascinating for us because it did give us a lot of research data on something that we would never be able to actually do in research because it would be unethical. So losing that much weight that fast through starvation was not something that you could ethically do in any research study. So we studied all of those patients, I'm calling them patients, people who lost a ton of weight really fast. They dropped their metabolism in a dramatic fashion because when you willfully do a starvation type of diet, you significantly drop your metabolic rate. Granted, they did a lot of muscle training, so they did have more muscle than somebody who normally ends up losing weight. But even that amount of muscle mass didn't account for the starvation. So the idea is if you're going to want some weight changes, don't starve yourself. Eat healthy, do the right things in terms of your healthy eating approaches, the way Julie was talking about in terms of insulin and not having the sugars, and also do some resistance training. The muscle training is good. Ripping muscles is important. It drives more energy into muscle tissue than taking energy and putting it into fat storage tissue.
When you starve yourself, you're like training your body to stretch out whatever nutrients it gets, right? And that's why your metabolism slows down?
Well, we think it may be even more intense than that, although that is the principle. There's a little energy package called the mitochondria. Mitochondria is a DNA package that lives in every single cell. It lives in our cells in our eyes. That's why we get wrinkles in our hair. And every single year, that mitochondria dies slowly, right? But what we see is with resistance training and muscle training, that we tend to build up this mitochondria. And starvation tends to make us lose the mitochondria. So you drop your metabolic rate because your mitochondria dies when you starve yourself. And your mitochondria is increased and gets better and fires more when you are active and doing resistance training. So the stuff that you tell people to do is perfect, and the better eating drives mitochondria, starvation kills it.
All right, so much to process right now. We'll be right back with more of the Zoomer.
There's such a huge misconception that to be in shape, you need to be hours in the gym, like you see Rocky, you know, training.
Welcome back to the show. Anjelica joins me now to discuss the relationship between muscle mass and metabolism and to demonstrate a couple compound movements that we can do from the comfort of our own home to build muscle mass. Now, before we jump in, I have to ask you, they say it's more important to build muscle mass as we age. Is that true?
Yes, because you want to keep all of those connective tissues in your body nice and strong, and also doing weight strength training or resistance training. It helps you build bone density. So we want to keep those muscles strong, big, so that we can keep our metabolism revved and therefore burn more calories. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you some compound exercises put into a bit of a routine. It gets every major muscle group of the body, and you can kind of custom tailor it to fit your needs and desires.
I have 5-pound weights.
I have 10 because I'm hardcore. So
and she's much more muscular than me.
And don't worry, I'm going to show you a weightless option as well and a kettlebell option. So let's get started. We're going to start with an upward row. Now you want to feel like you're zipping up through the center of the body right away, getting those abs. You can hang out here for a little bit, open the chest, knit the scapula together gently, keep the elbows open, and don't tense the shoulders up to the neck.
I can see a couple people in our live studio audience doing it with us.
Now we're going to move into the next part. You're going to do a little deadlift. You don't need to bend all the way over, just to mid-shin is fine. Now dig those heels into the floor. Activate those hamstrings, come back up. Then front lift up the center. Nice, strong core. Now, if you want to build on from here, you can do a little bicep curl. We're getting the biceps and a squat. Squats are one of the cornerstones to muscle mass training, which is unfortunate.
It's all right.
And
Stick
there are ways
that
around it. Let's do that again. So we're pulling up, zip, deadlift, front raise, inhale, core strong. Bicep curl with the squat. Let's keep compounding, right? And from here, if you want to add a little jump, boom. You don't have to jump. Maybe you can just pop those heels off the floor. Check in with your balance. Never hurt anyone. Keep this going. I'm going to show you what this looks like with a kettlebell. So this is what it looks like. We're zipping up through the center. It's a bit easier with a kettlebell because you have both hands on one implement. Deadlift, same approach.
You can feel your hamstrings there.
Oh, posterior chain is fired up. I'm going to use momentum with the kettlebell to swing, but if you're using weights, try to just use your muscles. Okay? From here, I'm shifting my grip. Now, you can't really do that with free weights, which is fine. This is the kettlebell modification. We're coming into a squat. Give me a couple bicep curls down here.
Woo!
Woo!
Yes.
And come up. And then I shift back. I do this about 6 times or until I get tired, right?
I'm getting tired.
I'm going to shift, come down, squat. So I'm getting the squats, I'm getting the biceps, I'm getting the pecs, everything, right? Because we don't have time to waste in today's day and age. Everybody's in a rush. Everyone wants maximum effectiveness for less time. Bicep, squat. I love your long, straight back, by the way. Look at that form. Look at her chest is lifted. She's not rolling through in the shoulders. If you want to take it a step further, you can set the weight down, burpee out.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I hate that too, but I have to show you these things. Dig your heels into the floor.
Burpees are my enemy. They're the worst.
I know. I'm sorry I said the B word. Okay. All right. Now, let's say you don't have weights and you just have your fine selves. Well, meet me on the floor like a mermaid. You're going
I'll face
to,
you.
Yeah, we face each other. So you have your outside arm supporting you. Now, this is the one-armed push-up, which I love so much, right? Because push-ups have a bad reputation, right? They're difficult. It's very easy to injure yourself, but it's how you keep the top part of your body nice and strong. All of us have an imbalance in our body. That's just the way we are. It's impossible to have a perfectly balanced right side and left side. So this is a great way for bridging the gap. So yeah, you see a little shaking happening? That's good.
You mean I'm shaking, you're not shaking.
I shake too. You can try the other side. I mean, you have to even out the sides. I want you to notice the fingertip to elbow line. So you want to get that straight line, and you want to feel like your fingers are webbing out along the surface of your floor so that there's even weight and pressure being distributed. And this is a great way to work your way up to push-ups, or if you're like me, I'm always grappling with different injuries and strains. So some days I don't go so far in one side as I do in the other. Let's get back up onto our legs. Another thing we don't like to do, but you always hear this with trainers, squats, right? Well, there's a way to get around that too. We're going to come to like a mid-level squat. You can, of course, go deeper. You've got such excellent form. And we're just going to, without shifting your weight onto the outsides of the feet, just feel like there's resistance against your outer thighs. Push out and release in. Push out, release in.
What are we working here?
So we're working the outsides of the legs, outsides of the glutes. Can you feel that more?
I can.
Down the whole outside of the leg? Yes. So who needs resistance bands when you can create your own resistance in your body?
Yes, I can feel this.
Yes.
It burns a little bit, though.
It does.
How long should we be doing this for?
Well, I always say 40 seconds on and then 20 seconds off.
Okay.
Come out of it.
Actually, I do like what you say about 6 to 12 minutes a day.
Yes. No, there's such a huge misconception that to be in shape, you need to be hours in the gym like you see Rocky, you know, training. Depends on what you want to do, really, with your life. If you're just going for a healthy lifestyle and to look great too, it's enough, right? On that note, we got one more. Do you have time for one more? You're going to take the knee up. 1, 2, 3, one more, 4. Switch. This is coordination as well, which never hurt anybody. 2, 3, 4. Switch. Good. Now, if you want to even go a little bit further, 3, you can even touch back behind you. So this is not mandatory. I want you to feel like you're wood chopping, Marissa. Chop that wood over your knee. Boom. Down. My
coordination isn't as coordinated as you.
No, but coordination is a muscle just like everything else. Right? So you know how to walk down the street, swing opposite arm to opposite leg. You don't walk like this. It's the same thing with any kind of exercise.
All right. Well, Anjelica, thank you so much for all of this. When we come back, nutritionist Julie Daniluk joins me on the relationship between glucose and metabolic health, and she'll dish on a recipe for a delicious sugar-free dessert. Don't go away.
Do I get some?
Yes.
Well, because sugar is one of the greatest drivers of the hormone insulin, and we know that insulin is actually the hormone that tells the body, let's hold more weight in fat stores. So it's so important for us to really keep our insulin nice and level.
Welcome back. Despite what many believe about metabolism, you can't outrun a bad diet and sugar consumption often go hand in hand. Julie Daniluk, registered nutritionist and author of the new book, Becoming Sugar-Free, joins me now to discuss the link between sugar and metabolism. One of the things we can do to empower ourselves is to cut sugar out of our lives. So talk a little bit about the relationship between sugar and our metabolisms and why we should consider a sugar-free life.
Well, because sugar is one of the greatest drivers of the hormone insulin, and we know that insulin is actually the hormone that tells the body, let's hold more weight in fat stores. So it's so important for us to really keep our insulin nice and level. That's also going to dramatically reduce our cravings because it's such a vicious cycle. So I promise people that as they give up refined sugar and corn syrup and white flour, and they keep their blood sugar nice and balanced, they're not going to have that real, what we call the reactive hypoglycemia. Because unfortunately, when insulin overshoots by consuming these refined products, you end up with a spike of insulin that causes your blood sugar to dip down too low. So the good news is, as you let go of the refined and you embrace, I love to say, the fiber, the protein, and the fat, that's going to actually trap the carbohydrates and trickle it into your system slowly, so you don't end up with these massive surges and then crashes.
So it's a myth that some people, when they're feeling low, oh, I just need a little bit of sugar to give me a little bit of a pick-me-up. Is that just a myth?
It is such a myth. And if people were to instead really embrace more protein, good fats, and slow burning carbohydrates, they would find that over time that they would have a more even keeled energy and that they would feel like they can cope with more.
All right, what are we cooking today? Let's get to it.
Yeah, today we're going to be making these delicious mango pudding cups that actually use gelatin, which have 11 grams of protein per teaspoon or per tablespoon, and that's going to give us a real power punch. Let's start with a third of a cup of water. The third of a cup is going in the bottom of our blender. And then we're going to take 2 tablespoons of our gelatin powder. And this is what's going to be really rich in protein. And you're going to throw that in there, and that's going to bloom in here. So that's going to expand and really have a lot of water attracted to it. And now I'm going to add a whole can of coconut milk, which I really like because it's rich in something called medium chain triglycerides that are really helpful and making more good energy in your system. And now I'm going to add these lovely mango. Now, mango is a good source of fiber and a great source of beta carotene. So that's a really lovely thing. And of course, it has our vitamin C in there. That's going to help battle back stress. And now let's add a little bit of our extras. Okay. So we're going to use a teaspoon of vanilla extract just to give it a pop of flavor. If you don't have that on hand, you can leave that out. And now we're going to move to a sugar-free sweetener. Now, some people who don't have any sugar-free sweeteners, not to worry, this tastes pretty good as is, but just to pop that flavor even more, we're going to have 1/4 of a teaspoon of our lovely monk fruit extract. If you can't find monk fruit, you can also use stevia extract. Those are 0-calorie natural sweeteners that are excellent. So that's going over there. And now I'm just going to add a pinch of unrefined salt. And I love that tiny pinch of salt is going to bring out that natural sweetness. And that's all we need to do. All we do now is add our lid, hold tightly so you don't have an accident in the kitchen.
This might get loud.
And it might get loud. So let's talk amongst ourselves, and we'll be back in a moment.
Be back in a moment.
It's not loud at all.
It's not too bad. Voila.
That is as easy as making a shake, right? Like anyone in the world can make these. It's so easy. And I'm going to add this to each one of my glasses. You know, just to make this extra playful, you can use your wine glasses. It's a whole new thing to enjoy in your wine glass. I'm going to move these over as I pull out the finished product for you, so you can see when we're done, it's going to be nice and stiff and have a delicious texture to it. So there we go. We're ready to go. We can just add a little bit of a sliced mango, just a little bit for beauty on top. There you go. And you're ready to enjoy our pudding cups. I love raspberries, one of the highest fiber berries of all.
For you.
And there you go.
What?
We're ready. We're ready to go.
It's really interesting how the salt brings out the sweetness of the fruits.
Yes,
right?
truly.
Very good.
Yeah, it really does. It truly does. And it balances the palate, because when we have sweet, salty, bitter, astringent, all in one meal, we're deeply, deeply satisfied.
Dr. Wharton, I do want to ask you, what would you say then to somebody who came to you and said, I don't need to worry about glucose because I'm skinny or I'm thin, so I don't need to worry about what I ingest?
You need to eat healthy. Excess amounts of sugar drive an addictive type of behavior within the parts of the brain that are addictive parts of the brain. So our brain was designed to want sugar, to want things that would put on extra fat. because the more fat we put on, the better we're able to survive the actual famine. So there is a genetic component to why we like sugar. But now in today's world, we don't need that part of the brain that says love sugar to put on extra fat. And so what we need is a more refined part of the brain that says eat healthy food, because there's always sugar around. We're always going to put on a little bit of extra weight. We're fine there. Eat healthy food, and we have to work with that part of our brain to try to encourage it to work with healthy food.
That's why I'm so thrilled that we focus on having a treat so you don't have to cheat. So many people feel like, I have to have this. But once they realize you can have a treat every single day, as long as it's avoiding the really bad sugars that spike insulin way too high, then you have a moderate approach that lets you out of food prison. Because a diet, like a restrictive diet that's super low calorie, not only slows our metabolism, but it also leads our brain to be in this mode of like, I can't wait to break out of prison. But this gives you the joy of freedom every day. I say you got to have a live it versus a diet, something that's doable.
Okay, Julie, a few seconds left, but where can we find your new book, Becoming Sugar-Free?
At becomingsugarfree.com, I show you all the different bookstores. Luckily, it's everywhere, whether it's Indigo, whether it's Amazon, you name it, it's everywhere. So you can go find it all at becomingsugarfree.com.
Terrific. And congratulations on becoming a #1 bestseller. We'll be right back with more of the Zoomer. Don't go away.
In general, healthy eating is quote unquote diabetes eating.
Welcome back to the show. It's been a while since we've had a live studio audience, and I do miss you guys being here all in studio, but delighted you're joining remotely. And so let's get to some of your questions. First question comes from Ramola. Hey, Ramola.
Hi.
Go ahead.
So my question was to do with diabetes. Do we, because your metabolism lowers as you age, do we have to keep those levels of sugar, insulin that the Canadian Diabetes Association has from since we were, 12 or 13 or 14? As we age and in our 70s, we still have the same levels. Is there an answer to that question?
So I run a diabetes and a weight management clinic. So diabetes is something I see every day. So the question of how much sugar should the individual who has diabetes and who doesn't have diabetes, should they be taking in every day? It's pretty much the same amount. It's healthy amounts of sugar. If you have type 2 diabetes, yes, taking in lower amounts of sugar is probably better. But in general, healthy eating is quote unquote diabetes eating. Don't take in as much sugar, exactly what Julia said. Taking in fats, proteins, and fibers is actually positive. So if you're looking at how much sugar the Canadian Diabetes Association says to actually take in on a regular basis, you don't have to adjust it from age, and you don't have to have the exact teaspoons and etc. What you have to know is are you taking in excess amount of sugar? You know if you're taking in excess amount of sugar. You know if you're taking in fibers and proteins and healthy fats. Everybody knows. So by doing the right thing and believing the right thing and feeling the right thing, not always necessarily adding it up and writing it out every single day, because that's not realistic. What's realistic is being healthy and eating healthy, feeling it in your heart and the way that you actually eat.
All right. Thank you, Ramola. Thank you, Dr. Wharton, for that question. The next question comes from Peggy.
Hi. Yes, a question about low thyroid, hypothyroidism, and how it affects your metabolism.
Hypothyroidism was diagnosed by a low metabolic rate, and there was formulas to calculate your metabolic rate called Harris-Benedict. And if you were 20% below, it was a sign of hypothyroidism before getting goiter or anything like that. And I think that thyroid is an important driver of your metabolic rate. And I think the variability between people in terms of metabolic rate at the same age, the same sex, and the same body composition is partially related to your thyroid axis activity. There are other modulators of your metabolic rate. One is what we call the sympathetic nervous activity, you know, how fidgety you are and all that. And this is another modulator. But yes, hypothyroidism is associated with usually weight gain and needs to be treated for normalizing your metabolic rate, and also you feel cold and all these kind of things.
Dr. Ravussin, you just mentioned something that brought to mind a question, which is you can measure your metabolic rate. How do we do that?
You do that with a what we call a hood system. That's like a canopy around your head. You have a flow of fresh air through it, and you measure oxygen consumption and CO2 production. When you have these two numbers, you know how many calories you burn. And this is very, very simple. It seems that our clinician in the studio is doing these measurements. It can be done also with a mask, but it's not as comfortable as a hood system. And it's a measurement, you know, which takes about 20 minutes. You discard the first 10 minutes because you are excited and you are exploring your environment. And then you take these last 10 or 15 minutes, and this is your value. And you have calories per minute. You extrapolate that to the daily, and you find, you know, 15, 16, 1700 calories a day.
And with that information, what are you able to do? Adjust your lifestyle?
Yeah, so what we recommend to people is that they should try to do as much resistance training as we talked about, to try to not lose muscle mass. So as we get older, we tend to lose muscle mass. So the thing is can we keep some of that muscle mass instead of losing it? And it only comes with actual resistance training. And as Eric has pointed out, we have very little ability to change our metabolic rate. Our metabolic rate is primarily driven by how much activity our brain is doing every day, our kidneys, our heart, our liver. We don't have control over that. We have a little bit of control over one organ, is the muscle mass. And that's a little bit of control. Genetically, our muscle mass is predetermined, it's preset. And so we try to do resistance training to have as much of a little bit of an impact on our metabolic rate as we can. But I will tell you, it is minimal. And if you do have hypothyroidism, then you should be treated, and that's easy. Every family doctor can treat hypothyroidism. Once your hypothyroidism is treated, your metabolic rate is back to your baseline and your normal metabolic rate. So you no longer have a problem with your hypothyroidism or low thyroid function if you're taking thyroid medication daily and your thyroid levels are actually normal. So no longer is it impacting. So Peggy, the question as to whether it's impacting, it's not going to impact if you're treated properly. If you're not treated properly, then you don't live in a first world country, that's for sure. And then it would impact. But everyone in a first world country gets treated for hypothyroidism.
All right, thank you for that. And our last question comes from Diana. Go ahead, Diana.
Well, hi. I think he kind of answered my question. So it's about weight training and resistance training. And is it, you know, once you've lost it, is it lost? Is it never too late, or is it too late?
Anjelica.
It is absolutely never too late to start building muscle. Now, do you have a certain advantage the sooner you start? Yes, of course. You're conditioning your body from a long period of time. You naturally have more muscle buildup, but it is never too late. Pick up those weights, pick up those resistance bands. You can always, it doesn't matter if you're starting from zero, it can't get worse than that. If you've never picked up a set of weights in your life, I can encourage you and implore you to definitely try and build it, and you'll feel stronger and you'll feel better, and you'll also feel more inspired to make better dietary decisions as well.
All right, well, when we come back, final thoughts from our panelists. That's next. Welcome back to theZoomer. It's time for final thoughts from our panelists. So we'll start with you, Julie.
I would love to include the fact that stress plays a massive role in this. If we look at how much cortisol has been produced in the average person going through this pandemic, we really can address so much of our stress by focusing on healing, healthy foods that actually help to reduce our cortisol, our stress response. And that will really positively impact our thyroid function and truly help us balance our gut microbiome that can play a big part in this whole equation. So I just wanted to mention that and say that food is the most healing and healthy way that you can empower yourself.
Anjelica. Just closing remarks, drink a lot of water, make fitness a part of your life. It doesn't have to be hours and hours in the gym. I'm going to, I've been living by this method of 6 to 12 minutes a day actually recently, and just pushing myself to do as many reps as possible in a short amount of time, and just getting my body moving, getting the blood flowing. And that's really all you need to make a difference. And try to lift something heavy every now and then, because you can do it.
Just don't throw your back out.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Wharton.
And so this show is about your metabolic rate. What I'm going to say about your metabolic rate is don't worry about it. Don't be overly concerned about your metabolic rate. Be concerned more about your overall health and the values. What do you value? Are you valuing being a healthy grandmother to your grandchild so that you can be there for them? If that's your value, then living healthy is important. All the things Julie and Anjelica have said are healthy living. We know what they are. We feel them in our heart, and we know how to do these things. So this metabolism story is not a story for you. Being healthy and understanding the values of a healthy life. That's what's important.
Dr. Ravussin.
Yeah, I think I agree with all the panelists, but I would like to add one thing. We are entering the period of what is called precision medicine, and one size is not fitting all. And when it comes to exercise or it comes to nutrition, there are studies being engaged right now by the National Institute of Health on what is called the molecular transducers of physical activity. And it's comparing, responders and non-responders in terms of resistance training, endurance training, or continuing to be sedentary. And there is another grant which is going to start very soon, which is about $180 million investment by the NIH, looking at diets, not for weight loss, but what do you get the most bang for from your diet? And it's called Nutrition for Precision Health. And once again, go on a low-carb diet, no refined sugar. It's very, very individual, and people are different from one to each other. And I think that this is an important message, that we are going towards this precision medicine.
All right, well, a big thank you to all of you who are here remotely watching live. We are so grateful that you were able to join us today. And again, I hope to see you back in studio soon. And for you at home watching, and of course, my brilliant panelists who joined us today, thank you for your expertise. That's all the time we have. We'll see you soon. For now, it's time to zoom out.